From the southeastern corner of western North Carolina, this is Folklore. I'm your host, James Hernishin. Democrats who listen to this episode are going to hear a lot of things that they like. If you happen to be a registered Democrat in need of a morale boost in what I am sure you consider to be these dark times, then sit back and get ready for a straight shot of optimism. Just know that you won't be able to apply what you hear to the primary on the 3rd of March, because my guest is not running as a Democrat. Instead, Kate Barr's name will appear on the Republican ballot. She wants to represent North Carolina District 14 in the House of Representatives. Her opponent is a current congressman for NC 14, Tim Moore. This apparent act of monkey-wrenching has annoyed some Republicans, including Polk County's GOP, which has officially condemned her campaign, because Kate Barr, a behavioral scientist from the outskirts of Charlotte, appears to be a fake Republican. The fact is, though, she's actually just playing by the rules as they're written. The problem is gerrymandering, that time-honored practice in which politicians select their voters instead of the other way around. A couple of years back, in the last round of creative redistricting, Polk County got split into two halves as part of a successful attempt to ensure the Republicans have as many seats as possible in Congress. As a result, the southeastern portion of Polk County now finds itself in a congressional district that also includes Burke, Cleveland, Gaston, Rutherford, and parts of Mecklenburg counties. It is now a very red district in which Democrats have almost no chance of winning. Should rural Polk County voters be lumped in with suburban Charlotte voters just so that one party can take a disproportionate share of the seats every election? I think most of us would probably say no. And Kate Barr has made this question the defining issue of her campaign. If there's no realistic way to win as a member of the party she's most closely aligned with, then why not run as a member of the other party? And yes, why not? Parties evolve through the primary selection process. It's how the Tea Party transformed the GOP almost 20 years ago, and it's how Donald Trump transformed it again a decade later, both times against the wishes of the party establishment. You could argue that Kate Barr is only doing exactly what the system was created to do. Whether that's actually her goal is kind of beside the point. The fact is, Kate Barr is a legitimate candidate for the Republican nomination for NC 14, and as you'll hear, the usually low turnout of a primary means her chances of upsetting the apple cart are most certainly greater than zero. All she needs is a few thousand unaffiliated voters to find her arguments about gerrymandering and her other policy positions to be more persuasive than those of her opponent. Kate dropped by Tryon on February 18th to coordinate campaign activities with some local supporters. We found a quiet spot behind the Fitzgerald to talk.
Kate Barr, welcome to Folklore.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm glad you came all the way to Polk County.
I'm thrilled to come all the way to Polk County. I visited Nina Simone's home just a few minutes ago, which has been on my North Carolina bucket list.
Pride of the community.
I believe it.
Yeah. All right. Explain who you are, where you come from, and then we'll get into how you evolved into this political person that you've become.
Yeah. I'm a North Carolina native. I was born and raised in Durham. I have lived in Virginia and Michigan and then came back to North Carolina when it was time to start my family. I've been married for 20 years to a man that I met in middle school, but we did not start dating until college. I have two kids, an 8 and a 9-year-old, and I spent most of my career studying how people's brains take in information, like what's the best way to communicate in order to cause behavior change, specifically looking in the healthcare field. So I was at University of Michigan building tools to help people do things like quit smoking or choose the best cancer treatment for them or make healthy decisions for their kids who are going through a kidney treatment, all kinds of things. But our brains take in information the same way across all of those domains. So that's like history in a nutshell. I also founded and ran a company for 7 years called Pip and Grow that was incredibly successful. I'm really proud of that time, but we were also regulated out of existence along with dozens of other companies at the behest of Democrats of all things. So we've lived a lot of lives, including this political one.
That background of studying how people absorb information, it sounds like you'd actually be a very useful political consultant when it comes to messaging and campaign management, but you never did that.
No, I mean, the political consulting right now, I think, is stuck about 30 years behind what we know about persuasive communication, and what I learned in my research. So I would be happy to work with candidates on honing their message and presenting what they have to say in a way that's what we call sticky, most likely to stay in someone's brain. But consulting isn't totally it for me. I was a part of Slay Strategies, which is a consulting firm, but that company only existed to, well, it still exists. I'm just not a part of it anymore because I'm running for Congress, but it only exists to support candidates running in gerrymandered districts across the country. So it's an entity that can do some good work, but we're not working for like Gavin Newsom.
And you did eventually decide you wanted to take a stab at politics, though.
Yeah, I got mad. I think a lot of us experienced that. I live in Davidson now. My state senator, Natasha Marcus, was gerrymandered out of her state Senate seat in the new 2023 maps. So if you'll go on a historic journey with me, in 2022, we had a democratically controlled state Supreme Court. They heard a court case called Harper v. Hall, which was about partisan gerrymandering. That court said that partisan gerrymandering was unconstitutional, and we had fair maps for Congress in 2022. We sent 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans to the U.S. House. Some folks might remember that.
Yes, and that actually pretty closely reflected the party split in the general vote.
That's kind of what a representative democracy looks like. When you have a purple state, you should send a purple delegation. We also, in that 2022 election, ended up losing Democratic control of the state Supreme Court, and the Republicans took it over. In unprecedented fashion, they reheard the Harper v. Hall case and declared that partisan gerrymandering is in fact allowed under our state constitution, essentially saying that North Carolinians have a right to a free election, but not a fair one. And so that's how we got these gerrymandered maps that everyone was running on in 2024. My state senator was a victim of those new map redraws. And, in my opinion, she was too loud and too female. And so the Republicans, you can look at the lines of the district, and they basically drew it specifically around her home so that she could not remain in office. And I thought that was garbage. And then I happened to be, as all good decisions are made, having a glass of wine at a Christmas festival in Davidson. And someone said, hey, jokingly, "Hey, Kate, you want to run for state Senate in this new loser state Senate district, which is District 37? And I said something like, ask me when I don't have a drink in my hand. But I couldn't let go of the idea. It felt like an opportunity to really connect gerrymandering and the way that our voting maps are drawn to people's everyday lives, and an opportunity to use what I know about how to communicate with people to actually take this political science thesis sounding ridiculous term like gerrymandering and bring it down to a real life, visible, example of how that is impacting our voting rights. And so that's how I ran.
And that was the Kate Can't Win campaign.
Yeah, Kate Barr Can't Win, NC Senate District 37. And I lost, just as promised, declared my loss on the day I filed to run.
But you didn't lose as badly as you thought, right?
Right. Surprisingly, yeah. It turns out we have a ton of districts in this state that haven't had folks really show up for them, candidates really show up for them. And even though the maps are drawn to keep the incumbent in power kind of no matter what, when a candidate shows up in a district like that, like when I showed up in District 37, people then also showed up at the polls to vote. So we had Great voter turnout. About 2,000 more voters voted in my state Senate district than in comparable state Senate districts. We flipped Republican votes to Democrat, which mattered a lot, especially in the Justice Riggs State Supreme Court win. And then importantly, Iredell County, which was the red part of my new district and the bulk of the district, was one of only 8 counties in the state to get bluer in 2024. That's 8 out of 100. So we had an impact. I had planned to go back to Michigan and, do my day job again with my salary and my health insurance. But because it worked, it felt like a thing like the pilot program worked, right? I'm a scientist. So now we've got to take the experiment to the next level. And we're trying that across the state this next cycle.
Okay, now we have to get at the core philosophical roots of this campaign, because I would call it quixotic.
Sure.
Because it's a bit bizarre,
yeah.
Right? You are a progressive, liberal, Democrat thinking or adjacent,
aligned yeah.
person, but you're running as a Republican.
Yes.
And a lot of people are going to go, WTF.
Yeah. In fact, most of them do, which is fair. I love the word quixotic here because, of course, quixotic is related to Don Quixote. Don Quixote tilted at windmills. So he would ride on his horse and attempt to stab the windmill. And that's kind of what we're doing in North Carolina right now. We are trying everything we can think to try to break these gerrymandered maps and give voters their power back.
Now, on the one level, it would occur to me that one of your core missions is to draw more attention to the dysfunction that is gerrymandering. Polk County has a big stake in this as well, because we were just split in half.
Yeah.
Thanks to the same gerrymandering shenanigans at the Supreme Court. And it's interesting how many people still aren't aware of it because they're not clued in following politics. And every episode I do with someone doing a congressional campaign, in my intro, I have to explain, okay, if you live in Saluda and Cooper's Gap, you're in NC 11, but if you're in Tryon and Columbus, you have to vote in NC 14. And it just seems odd because we're only 19,000 people in this county.
And when you look at where the district line was drawn, it is totally bizarre. It just doesn't make any sense unless you consider that the map makers are trying to get just the perfect combination of Republican and Democratic voters in every district to ensure the outcome that they want. Then those lines start to make sense. Yeah, one of the things that I do, and we can totally do it for this podcast if you want to, is invite people to challenge me to connect gerrymandering to basically any issue they can think of, because it is my thesis that gerrymandering touches every part of our lives. It affects our ability to drive to work in a timely fashion, to raise our kids, to pay our taxes, to make a good living, to own a home.
Okay, pick one of those because I'm not sure the connections are obvious.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite?
Drive to work.
Drive to work. Okay, so we're talking about transportation. Roads are built by the federal government, state government, and sometimes local government. So when you think about, let's take a state road. So NCDOT has to maintain a lot of our roads. NCDOT works at the behest of our state legislature. Our state legislature is gerrymandered, which means that in 2024, Democratic state legislative candidates in total got more than 50% of the vote in North Carolina. Republican state legislative candidates in total got about 48%. But when you look at the state house and the state senate, it's about 2/3 Republican in each. Because of the way these maps are drawn, our leaders don't have to listen to us, the voters, because they've drawn the maps to ensure that they can keep their power. So when we, the voters, go and say, this road is overcrowded, you need to do something about it, or it's not safe for my kids to cross the street to get to school in this place.
Well, in this county, too, we have Highway 176 between Tryon and Saluda, and it's going to be tens of millions of dollars. I don't know how much to fix after Helene.
Yeah. Which you haven't gotten and were promised, but yes. Yeah. And so you go, that's also a federal one. But so if you go to advocate to your state representative to help fix the roads because they control NCDOT's budget, so they are the ones who can make NCDOT make your drive better, they don't have to care what you say. And so they don't. So they will do whatever is best for them, whatever the party tells them to, because what keeps them in power is doing what the party and what the map makers want them to do, not what voters want them to do. When it comes to the Helene funding, like this one is particularly egregious to me. So our U.S. House maps, in 2024, we sent 10 Republicans and 4 Democrats to the U.S. House. The Congress passed, they appropriated money, $200 million plus, to Western North Carolina to help with Helene recovery. All that had to happen was Kristi Noem signing her name on a piece of paper. Congress basically said, you must spend this money in this way. And that should be the law of the land. That's how our government is supposed to work. Congress has the power of the purse. And Kristi just didn't sign it for 15 months because she was using the waste, fraud, and abuse phrase to say that she needed to look into it more, which is ridiculous because that is actually not her role. She is not elected to do that job. That is not in the purview of her job. She is supposed to sign the paper and get it on. Tim Moore, who is, at least for some of you, your representative, should have been in front of her office door every single day, offering to help her make the letter shapes with her hands if required to get the funding released for his district. My question is, why isn't he doing that? Why didn't he go to those lengths? And it's because he knows he gets to keep his job, even if the entirety of Western North Carolina is pissed at him. And that is absolutely ridiculous. That is not how democracy should work. It is behavior like that that led me to take this, frankly, we can call it unusual, we can call it extreme step of maintaining my values and my progressive stance on things, remaining values aligned with the Democratic Party, but changing my registration to Republican so that he would actually have to answer for the choices he's made.
And again, you chose to do that because you think you might actually have a better chance of getting rid of Tim Moore as a Republican than a Democrat in a hopelessly gerrymandered red.
Right. Not just think. The numbers tell us that that is true. Because primary voter turnout is low, you get about 15% voter turnout in a primary election.
I checked. Now, NC 11 and NC 14, they're very different last time, but generally we had about 19% turnout.
But that's when we had competitive districts.
Kinda.
Well, I mean, that was when District 14 itself at that time went to Jeff Jackson. It was a completely different shape. And so even if you take 20% voter turnout, let's bump it up 1%. So we have 400,000 unaffiliated and Republican voters who can vote on the Republican ballot. Let's see, 20% of that would be 80,000 votes cast in the Republican primary, which means I would need 40,001 to win.
Which isn't actually that many.
Especially when you consider that we started at 400,000 voters who could vote. And we know that this district is somewhere between 35 and 40% left-leaning when you look at electoral outcomes. So it is extremely achievable in a primary election if the people turn out to vote.
It does require folks who can vote in the Republican primary. So if you're a registered Democrat,
you're out of it.
And there is a Democrat who's a relatively well-known Democrat, I guess, running, and he's probably going to win, Brent Caldwell.
I don't know. There are 3 Democrats on that ticket, and I've had the pleasure of doing a bunch of stuff with all 3 of them. Amit is young and bright and passionate, and my hunch is that he won't win this time around, but I don't think we've seen the last of him, and he's forced some really interesting conversations. Lakeisha has gotten some really impressive endorsements, maybe not within Polk County, but back in Mecklenburg and in Gaston. And so I am grateful that I don't have to make that choice. My choice is easy. I'm going to pull a Republican ballot and hit my name and choose nothing else and walk away. But the Democratic ticket is really interesting right now.
And I think recently unaffiliateds became, for the last few years, affiliates have been the largest plurality of voters.
That's
in the
right.
State. And
it's about 40% in this.
Republicans are slightly above the Democrats. It's pretty darn close. But so if you add up all the Republicans unaffiliated, it shouldn't be that hard.
Right.
But it's still going to be a big lift because you're talking about Tim Moore, who's one of the more powerful Republicans in North Carolina.
He is certainly very well funded and has secured a lot of money for himself through his positions through the years.
So you're running a campaign. Again, it's a little unusual. It's a lot unusual. I don't see yard signs all over the place, but then I don't see yard signs for Tim Moore either.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
A thing that people like to say is yard signs can't vote. So if you're spending, I'm trying to run a very lean campaign. We've talked about this being an experiment. I don't think it's ethical to go out and try to raise millions of dollars on an experiment, right? I come from a world where you try something on a small scale, and if that works, then you grow it. You don't just throw everything immediately at something that who knows? Like, I genuinely do not know how this will turn out. We have yard signs, and I'm happy to deliver them to folks. You can email us, but I think generally speaking, those will go at polling places. So people will have a chance to scan a QR code and read about me as they go in to vote, or they'll go in front yards, because yard signs put on the side of highways don't have very much impact. They're not great for the planet, and they're expensive. Now, Tim Moore has put out, I think it was 20 yard signs in front of the Cornelius Town Hall, which is an early voting site. So there are places where he has planted quite a few yard signs, but it apparently is not Polk County.
Well, I would assume that's simply because he doesn't think he has to work very hard for the votes here. Right. And you're hoping that maybe he's wrong.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm hoping that he's wrong. I'm hoping really that what happens is people pay attention to the power of their vote in primary elections. In the vast majority of our U.S. House, State House, and State Senate elections in North Carolina, the primary is where the leader is actually chosen. And so it is incredibly important for folks to turn out and vote in that primary. And we have such low primary voter turnout that, looking back at 2024, when Tim ran for Congress for the first time, he was elected with like 10% of the total registered voters in this district. And then because of the way the district was drawn, basically 10% of the electorate here decided he was the one who would go to Washington, D.C. That's not enough people weighing in on a really important decision.
Well, voter turnout is a perpetually perplexing problem for politicians. I mean, obviously the establishment likes that, but
yes.
But if you're an insurgent candidate, the low turnouts during off years in primaries, it must be maddening in a way.
I mean, I get it though. Gerrymandering isn't just about securing political power in the present moment. It is also about disenfranchising voters in those districts who might want something different, because it does make voters feel like their votes don't matter. And if your vote doesn't matter, why are you going to go stand in line? Why are you going to go out on a rainy day? Gerrymandering also makes voter suppression easier, because when you have fewer competitive districts, it's much more efficient and cost effective to suppress the voter turnout in those specific competitive places and just let whatever happen in the other spots. So a piece of this campaign, well, yes, it is about winning. And yes, it is about unseating Tim Moore and, frankly, putting a Congress in D.C. that will actually hold this administration accountable, unlike the one we have now. It is also about calling attention to the importance of primaries, giving voters an avenue to actually have a say in who represents them. Even if voters don't choose me, if we can increase primary voter turnout, I will feel good about the job that we have done, because having more people weigh in on these decisions is really important. It's also, frankly, about giving folks, the 30 to 40% of Democrats or left-leaning unaffiliateds, or even the moderates who are like, what country do I live in anymore? The opportunity to get out and do something, and to do it right now, when they aren't trying to suppress the vote, to make Tim spend money, to make the GOP work hard in a district where they didn't think they were going to have to.
I have a suspicion that voter turnout will be a little bit higher this time, simply because so much attention has been focused on the Democrats retaking Congress.
Yeah.
And so your role in NC 14 might ride on that a little bit.
Maybe. Yeah. Although, as you pointed out, Democrats can't vote for me. It's only unaffiliated voters and Republicans who can pull that Republican ballot.
But there's plenty of Democrat leaning unaffiliated
That's
out
true.
there.
Yeah. And we will just have to look and see if that, like, the data analysis on the other side of this is going to be just such a treat. I cannot wait to see just how it goes.
Well, one last thing then. Polk County, how familiar are you with?
I'm going to be super honest with you. I know about Nina Simone. I know a little bit about Tryon. Polk County is 2 to 2.5 hours from my home and is a great example of why, and this is like my real outrageous take, why we need smaller congressional districts, because Davidson and Charlotte and the Mecklenburg County area and Polk County and Cleveland County, like, we are very different communities with different needs who probably should be electing different types of leaders. But tell me about Polk County. What should I know?
Well, it is the first bit of the Blue Ridge Mountains as you're driving west, and Tryon's a lot about horses because of Tryon Equestrian Center, of course. Where I'm from, Saluda, is the top of the steepest mainline railroad grade, which is in the process of being converted into a rails to trails bike and hiking path.
So you're going to get to really fly down hill, right?
I was actually worried about that. But it's like a 5% grade, which doesn't sound like much, but
that's plenty.
After 5 miles, you're going pretty fast.
On a snow day, that's a really good time.
Yeah. Anyway, it's expected to be a huge economic boon for the county. It's going to go all the way from Inman, South Carolina to Tuxedo, which is just shy of Hendersonville.
Yeah.
In Henderson County. And Saluda is right in the middle. And so we're really looking forward to that. There's like 20,000 people in this county. And I don't think they pay a lot of attention to politics outside of presidential years, but this year feels a little bit different. And we've got some weird elections going on. For instance, the sheriff.
Yes.
Which I don't know why we elect sheriffs, but anyway, especially partisan sheriffs. But there's no Democrats running, so we have three running for the Republican. And I think there's going to be a fair number of unaffiliated Democrat-leaning folks who decide to pick a Republican ballot so they can vote in the sheriff's race. And also our state rep. Yeah. Jake Johnson is facing a challenge from Mike Hager, who you might know of. And
I'm familiar with them.
That's another reason for unaffiliates to vote in the Republican. So I think it's going to be a little bit interesting in March.
Gaston County has a similar thing happening with their sheriff race. There is someone challenging the incumbent sheriff. I agree with you. Like, between judicial races and sheriff races being partisan, school board, I mean, it's just like gotten kind of wild. And so I think a piece that will be really interesting for us to look at about this campaign is what impact did those like sheriff races or state legislative races have on who's pulling Republican ballots? Because that can tell us a lot about how effective or not this strategy might be in other places. I mean, I can tell Polk County is beautiful. We had a beautiful drive-in today. It's, of course, a lovely day. Thank goodness it wasn't rainy and snowing. I chatted with a gentleman named Ricky who lives near Nina Simone's house. I mean, I know I've talked about her a lot, but I'm a fan. And Ricky was mostly talking about the retaining wall in his front yard and how helpful that's been, right? And so my hunch is, and tell me if this is right, that a thing that I have found to be true in all the other counties. So Polk is the last county I'm visiting. Now I have all 6. It's like District 14 bingo. A thing that I have found to be true is folks are worried about housing, whether it's being able to rent or buy a home or repair the home that they have. It's about, just general cost of living. Every family has different financial pressures, whether it's childcare, healthcare, maybe all of it, groceries. And people just really, frankly, need more money in their pockets. And we have seen the largest transfer of wealth, I mean, trillions of dollars from the, lower 90% of citizens in the US into the top less than 1% of our population. And it is time to move that money back. So I talk a lot about fair maps. I talk a lot about gerrymandering, but I also think it's really important that people know what I would do if I actually got elected.
I was just going to ask if maybe we would talk about one thing, and how about we talk about affordable housing?
I would love
because
to.
One of the interesting things about Polk County is there's a lot of folks from South Carolina, especially, and some from Georgia and Florida, who own second homes or third homes.
Sure.
Saluda, I think half of the homes actually are owned by absentee owners from South Carolina. Because Saluda was settled by folks from Charleston on the railroad. Anyway, so there's all kinds of folks who cannot afford to buy a house and be a teacher or, law enforcement officer or something. And so finding a way to free up some of this housing, and it's only getting worse with Airbnbs.
Yes. Where large corporations will buy a lot of homes and use them as Airbnbs. It's not just individual homeowners.
Right. We have seen that even in Saluda. And one thing that occurred to me was that I know in South Carolina, if you have a second home, the taxes are significantly higher. We don't do that in North Carolina, which explains why the South Carolinians are buying their second homes in North Carolina.
Of course.
So
what do we do?
Yeah, I mean, I think there should be a national attempt to make it difficult to have a second home in a place that's displacing people from, who have to live where they work.
Yeah. So housing is a really good one to talk about because we need to come at it from several different angles. There's not a single, do this one thing and the problem is solved policy that we can put in place. So first thing we need to do is implement what's called the money agenda from the Patriotic Millionaires. That is, I know, bless them. What a name. It's a trio of 3 bills that essentially raise minimum wage to $20 an hour, eliminate federal income tax on the first $100,000 that any family earns. And then the part of the way that you pay for that is you make every dollar that comes into someone's bank account be treated the same in tax law. So right now, if you earn $1 doing a job, that is taxed differently than if you inherit $1 from your uncle, than if you make $1 on the stock market. And you pay more taxes on the income you make doing your job than you do on either of the other two.
Which is backwards.
Totally backwards. That is how you start concentrating more and more wealth in the hands of the wealthy, because you have to have money to invest in the stock market. And then you can make more money because you don't have to pay tax on the money that you made in the stock market. So we need to tilt that back. And the way that you do that is say $1 is $1 is $1, and we are taxing them the same. We also raise taxes on people who make more than $1 million a year and start to shift the incentive structure so away from being extremely wealthy, right? As soon as it's not as beneficial to make $2 million a year as it is to make $999,999 a year, you might find that large business owners perhaps pay their employees more instead of just trying to earn more and more themselves. That's a dreamed for outcome. It's not a part of the plan. That's just me wishing it so. So that's a piece of it, which is just to get money in people's pockets as quickly as we possibly can. Those bills are already written. There's bipartisan support for them. If we elect the correct Congress, that could get done in 2027. So that is like an achievable, immediate impact of making a different choice in our congressional representation. Now, you'll find that a lot of our Congress folks that aren't supporting those, it's because rich people are their donors. We can come to campaign finance a different time, but that is a huge part of the problem. So first, people need money in their pockets so they can afford the homes they have, afford the rent that they have, and start to actually save for a down payment. We've also seen, President Trump did this, a moratorium on these large corporations being able to buy up huge collections of homes to use for something like an Airbnb or a Vrbo, I think is what they want us to call them. I always called it VRBO. I don't know. And I think that was the right move. We're in a housing crisis, and the government should work for the people, not for corporations. And so if corporations are causing problems with housing, then we should stop that. We need to increase housing supply.
That's a tricky one.
That's a tricky one. That also dovetails with immigration. When we talk about being able to build homes, we talk about needing to stop tariffs on Canadian lumber, stop tariffs on Mexican gypsum. Those are like core ingredients to building a house, and we're tariffing them, which slows down the pipeline and makes it more expensive. That's the exact opposite of what we need right now. And we need to create a guest worker program that is actually ethical and allows folks to come to the country legally and build the houses that we need in the places that we need them. That's called the H-2A visa program. That's for like farm workers and construction workers. And there are huge problems in that program. The main one being that your visa, if you're trying to come to the country legally to work and make money, which we need for folks to do, you have to get an employer to sponsor you on your visa. And that employer then is the only way you stay in the country. And so we see employers take advantage of that and pay those workers less, have them work in poorer conditions, potentially unsafe conditions, especially when we're talking about agriculture.
Yeah, the food, meat processing.
Exactly. Yes. Or pesticides, right? Whereas if you come to the country without documents and someone's treating you badly, you can leave and go work for somebody else. But if you have come in the legal process and you have the documentation, you can't leave your employer. So we need to change that structure so that you come to work within like a location, like a geographic area and an industry domain rather than for a single employer. And then, yes, people should pay high taxes on the luxuries of life, whether it's your second home or your fifth yacht. Like, we have 60% of American families who cannot achieve a minimum quality of life on what they earn. 60% is also what we like to call the majority. And that is absolutely nuts for a country as wealthy as we are, with as many billionaires as we have, to have the majority of Americans not even able to achieve a minimum quality of life on their income is just wrong. So pretty much every lever we can pull to free up housing that exists, rehabilitate buildings that could be higher density housing like apartments or townhomes in like a main street area. So that's like rehabbing established buildings, increase housing supply, single family homes, but also higher density housing closer to town centers like duplexes, quadplexes that help bring a community together in like a co-located geographic space where they can walk to things. All of that is going to be critical to solving this problem. Those are projects that probably take years and years, but all of them are things, we can get this money agenda thing done, and that will immediately alleviate some financial pressure on families. But all of this stuff, it's like long-term change in our visa system and our tariff system, in essentially zoning for towns, and in like our tax system for additional like luxury items, planes, vacation homes, all of those things.
Well, it's actually really refreshing to talk about specific policy, because the discussion around your campaign up to now has been mostly about the fact that you're a pseudo Republican.
Yeah.
So
a faux publican.
A faux publican.
Yeah, that's the sticky part, right? That's what gets people to go, what is that again?
Is it working get your foot in the door by talking about the gerrymandering and the faux Republican? Does it lead to discussions like we're having?
Absolutely. Every voter knows what it feels like to be ignored. And the vast majority of us, 81% Americans in the United States, are electing officials like their state legislators on non-competitive districts. It's 83% for the U.S. House. So we all know what it feels like to be ignored. So naming the problem, everyone hates it. And then we can talk about how that problem affects their daily lives and what they can do about it. I actually love talking about policy, but no one listens to that on the internet or reads about it online. And so I am thrilled to talk to you about it. But it is something that I end up talking about a lot when I'm sitting with people face to face, because each person has their own specific issue that they feel like needs to be addressed. all of them come back to cost of living. And so there's a lot of stuff that we could be doing better. In fact, practically everything that we're doing now is harming people's ability to live well, unless you already have a huge ton of money. I caught myself from swearing right there. I just want my mom and dad to know that I didn't do it, Dad.
Well, it also means I don't have to put the explicit switch on my podcast upload.
Yes.
So yeah, thank you.
You bet.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we've covered everything I wanted to talk about. I hope you can spend a few more hours in Polk County.
Oh, for sure. I'm going to be here all evening. I'm going to go have an ice cream social with some local volunteers. If folks want to learn more about me, they can find me at katebarrcanwin.com or at katebarrcanwin on all the internet social media places except Twitter. I don't do that one.
Well, that's good because
it's a top thing.
And I'll be putting links in the show notes.
Oh, great. So, thank you for that.
All right.
And I want people to email. If you want a yard sign, send us an email at info@katebarrcanwin.com. Or if you have questions, I've been answering a lot of policy questions over email during this campaign.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Not everyone bothers to come out here when it comes to these congressional races. So I really appreciate it.
That's a real shame. It's beautiful here, and I am pretty excited to be here.
All right. Thanks again.
Thanks.
Right.
I enjoyed that, even though as a resident of NC 11, I will have no say in Kate's electoral fate. But I am willing to bet that a few registered Democrats in NC 14 now wish they were unaffiliated. As we discussed, there are other good reasons for otherwise left-leaning independent voters to choose a Republican ballot in this primary, specifically the races for NC State House 113 and Polk County Sheriff. Early voting runs until February 28th, and primary election day is the 3rd of March. By the way, I invited Tim Moore to join Folklore, but he hasn't responded. Got any thoughts on this episode or suggestions for future shows? Send them to jamesh@folklore.com. Thanks for listening, and happy voting.